What up, YouTube? This is Steven, and welcome back. In this video, um, basically, I'm going to be following up on a previous video that I did about, the Spanish words, and the Spanish vocabulary you learn inside of class versus the vocabulary you use outside of class. All right. So here we go. So first on the list is una sala de clase versus un salón de clase. I initially learned una sala de clase, as the word for classroom. However, I have heard un salón de clase used more than una sala de clase. And but despite that, like, I initially learned una sala de clase. However, in a recent Spanish class that I'm taking through my local library, the teacher used the word un salón de clase, like she gave it to us as a vocabulary word. So I guess technically I learned both in class, but this class that I'm taking right now is very recent, while the very first class, or the very first Spanish class that I took, are like way back in the early 2000s. All right. And I know, like, lately I think I hear more like un salón de clase as, like, the word that's used outside of class, right? So, yeah. All right, the next word on the list is, and I have a list written down too, just in case you're like, where is he looking at? All right, what's he looking at? All right, so the next word on the list is un armario versus un closet. There you go. Un armario versus un closet. All right. So initially I learned the word un armario as the word for closet, right? In like a Spanish class. And it is, but I just hear the phrase, hear the word, el closet way more than, el armario, right? And I think as far as the United States is concerned, it just has to do with maybe like the English influence, but el closet is used throughout Latin America, I believe, so while it does have it, while in the United States, I can see why we would use it, but they also use it throughout the whole, Western Hemisphere, or Spanish-speaking Western Hemisphere. So I think, some people may confuse this for like Spanglish, but it is it's considered like a legitimate word, in the Spanish language. But some people are like, closet? Oh, really? They'd be like, that sounds a little Spanglishy, Spanglishy, right? I got it. I've seen. I guess that's why, like, a lot of Spanish speakers always got to add an "e" whenever they say like s and a consonant together. Like, instead of scam, they say escam, or like Spanish or estor, right? All right. Let's move on to the next phrase, or the next word. All right. Las gafas versus los lentes. And I initially learned las gafas as glasses, right? In my very first Spanish class, or at least, yeah, probably the very first Spanish class I took. I learned it as glasses, but I hear los lentes way more than las gafas. Maybe it's like a Mexican influence. Usually that's the culprit. Well, I don't know if culprit's the right word, but that's the source usually, right? But yeah, I usually hear los lentes a lot more. I I don't really hear las gafas that much. Hmm. Interesting. All right. Next phrase, and this one's interesting. All right. Mi nombre es versus yo me llamo. You know? And of course, all the different variations of these phrases too, right? But usually, like in the beginning Spanish classes, a lot of times they tell you like, oh, if you want to introduce yourself, you can say like, oh, mi nombre es Steven. But I tend to hear, me llamo or yo me llamo a lot more than mi nombre es. I don't tend, I don't, I guess, some Spanish speakers do use it, but I just hear the phrase me llamo a lot more for some reason. And I feel like that's probably the more authentic way to say or to introduce yourself, you know? But this is just something that I noticed. This may just be like um, a matter of personal preference, perhaps. But it's just something that I picked up on. All right, next phrase, next word. El pupitre versus el escritorio. And, this is more so from my recent Spanish class. The teacher says that, el pupitre means desk. But she also follows it up and says, like, usually you're going to hear, escritorio more, right? So that's probably like the first time like a Spanish teacher has said, okay, well, they got this here in the book or whatnot, but you may hear this one a lot more. And honestly, I'm not sure because this is the recent Spanish class. Before then, I was just using el escritorio for desk, right? I'm not sure about my very first Spanish class way back in the early 2000s. I know the book that I used has desk as el banco, right? But for me, anytime I hear el banco, I think of a bank, not a desk. But it can be a desk. But I don't, a bench, I believe as well. But I don't. I just use it as bank usually. I guess it probably can, but it's just a little strange for me personally. All right, so next on the list, here's the interesting one. This is a really interesting one, right? Alquilar versus rentar, right? And also we can include the noun variation of that too. El alquiler, right? Versus la renta. And of course the verb forms mean to rent, right? Alquilar means to rent, of course, right? And I believe that is kind of like used universally as to rent, right? And as well, el alquiler means the rent, right? And that's also used, more or less universally throughout the Spanish-speaking world as, rent and to rent respectively, right? I guess the rent and to rent. You know what I mean. Flip them around, then it's respectively, okay? But in the United States, anytime I see an advertisement, an ad for apartments or any other thing that needs to be rented or could be rented, I see the verb rentar, and the noun la renta. I guess that's because partially of the English influence of the Spanish that's spoken in the United States, but also the Mexican influence too. It's a bit weird because in Mexico they use the word rentar and la renta too, as to rent. You they use that way more than alquilar and alquiler, um, but um, I believe they use that because of the English influence. Like, okay, Mexico initially had the influence of the United States as English, right? So they wind up using rentar more than alquiler, right? Uh, then we, the Spanish speakers in the United States, took that and borrowed from their influence, their English influence, and took it to our Spanish that we speak in the United States. It's a bit weird. It's weird. It's interesting, right? But to sum it up, basically, the English influence from the United States, that linguistic influenced Mexico's Spanish that they use, but then the Spanish that we use in the United States received the Mexican influence. So it's kind of like a big circle because we received their English influence Spanish from Mexico. It's kind of interesting, kind of like the whole like circle thing. But yeah, that's really interesting. And also, side note, the verb rentar is actually kind of by other Spanish speakers understood as, to yield, parentheses, a profit, right? And the noun, la renta, the noun, right? That is considered by many to be, asset, income, or earned income. Strange. Strange, right? But that happens, that happens. It's kind of like, I guess, us in the United States, I think we use like to rent versus in the UK they use to hire as to rent. Right. Very, very interesting. All right. El departamento versus el apartamento. And okay, el departamento was the first word that I learned for apartment. And I believe this word is used in other Spanish-speaking countries, but not in the United States. Yeah. We're using, el apartamento. All right, we ain't using, we do use the word el departamento, right? Right, we do, but we use it as a department, not an apartment, right? Like, oh, el departamento de trabajo, right? Or like el departamento de seguridad nacional, etc. Right? So yeah, but I learned this like in like my third year of Spanish, in high school, as like, our teacher had used the word. She had wrote up something and used the word el departamento, right? And it's like, oh, it means apartment. Okay. But the thing is, in the United States, we ain't using that word. We using apartamento because, again, the English influence, right? And plus, I think in Mexico, they use apartamento, miento también, right? Yep. Always, always traces back to Mexico. Next word on this list, el bolígrafo versus la pluma. And el bolígrafo was the first word I learned as pen. I believe some people say it means like ballpoint pen as well, but that's the first word I learned for pen. However, usually when I hear pen used, they don't use el bolígrafo. Even though that word is considered like pretty much like general standard Spanish, a word used across the board kind of. But usually when I hear the word for pen, it's like la pluma, not el bolígrafo. Interesting. I'm not sure if I ever heard anyone actually say el bolígrafo. I mean, I know it's a legitimate word and all, but I'm not sure if I actually heard anyone say it. Perhaps it's the Mexican influence, even though some people may argue that, well, I'm not sure if Mexico uses la pluma. I think they do, though. I think Mexico does. I'm not 100% sure, but I think Mexico does. It's kind of strange because a lot of different countries have variations for like pen. There's like so many different variations for that word. I'm like, it's just a pen. Can't we all just agree on one word? Apparently not. Apparently not. But yeah, it's just. But that happens. That does happen, especially in Spanish. And yeah, la pluma is used in Mexico. Again, the Spanish in the United States has a strong Mexican influence, but of course it's a regional thing too. But ultimately, I think the Spanish in the United States has the strongest influence is Mexican Spanish. But of course, it depends on the region too. If you're in New York, then it's probably like like Puerto Rican and Dominican, perhaps. And if you're like in Florida, then it's like a Cuban influence, and then you're like in the Southwest, as well as like Chicago, I believe too, and some other places. It's like a Mexican influence. So yeah, it just depends, but yep, pretty much. All right, next phrase on the list: tomar una foto versus sacar una foto. All right, so I was initially taught that, tomar una foto was, to take a photo, take a picture, right? And it is, but I just tend to hear sacar una foto a lot more than tomar una foto. And I guess that's strange. Maybe, I don't know, because I would think I would hear tomar a little bit more, but maybe I'm just not listening hard enough, But usually I've heard this word on in the media. So that may be a possibility because I'm thinking, since we have such a strong English influence in the United States, tomar una foto would seem like the option that we would use, right? Because it's closer to English than sacar una foto. But, maybe I'm just not listening to the right folk. I believe that both can be used, but I just feel like probably sacar is probably used across the board more so than tomar. You could probably just hear it a lot more. So yeah. All right. Let's see. All right. Okay, here's the next one. This is an interesting one, right? All right, so we're on number 10. All right. Okay, por la madrugada, mañana, tarde, y noche versus en la madrugada, mañana, tarde, noche, etc., right? I initially learned the phrase as por la, right? Not in la. I hear both, but I think I hear in la a lot more for some reason. And for some reason, I feel like I was taught that in la was incorrect to say. Like you weren't supposed to say in la. You were supposed to say por la. But I guess maybe I misheard. Maybe they changed up the rules since I've been in Spanish. Been in my first Spanish class or first few Spanish classes. I don't know. Yeah, that's just a little interesting to think about for me. All right. So here's my honorable mention for this video. All right. Rosa versus rosado and rosada. All right. And rosa meaning pink. Right. This is a little different for me because when I hear pink said in Spanish, I usually hear rosa. And I was actually taught rosa in my very first Spanish class to mean pink. So I was actually taught like the phrase that you actually use outside of class, right? However, in other classes that I've taken recently, they've presented the color as rosada and rosado, right? And I just find that a little odd for me because, usually anytime I've encountered the word, the color, the adjective, right? It was rosa. It's just, you're like, it's just something to think about. And I suppose the same could be said for, naranja versus anaranjado and anaranjada. There you go. And for some reason, I'm a bit blurry on this particular word because for some reason I think like I had like I think for a while I never knew how to say the word orange because it just never came up. Then I found out how to say it, and it was like, oh, the first word I learned was anaranjado, right? Anaranjada. But usually I just hear naranja more. Yeah. But for some reason, I think I may have been under the impression that you could just say orange or orange for orange. I never wrote it down or anything, but I don't know. It was just, that was maybe like one color that just wasn't in my vocabulary for some reason. I don't know why. It never came to mind. And I've studied Spanish for a long time. And, I also studied, throughout college too. But the word just never came up. So, yeah. Well, that's the end of my video. Thanks a lot for watching. Feel free to comment. Feel free to subscribe. Feel free to give me a thumbs up. Your feedback and support are extremely appreciated and extremely valued. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.